Can you believe that somewhere in the world, there's a country where the very survival of millions is completely tied to a single lake and a kernel of corn? A place where nameless dancers, their faces hidden, dance wildly in the thick dust to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. Where poverty may grip every corner, yet people are willing to share their last handful of cornmeal, or even raise children who share none of their blood. Forget the glamorous cities or the endless savannas teeming with wild beasts. Welcome to Malawi, the warm heart of Africa. It's a brilliant paradox, where the absolute edge of uncertainty gives rise to a fierce, almost unbelievable vitality and pride. Mornings in the capital city of Lilongwe don't begin with a leisurely pace. They dive straight into the daily grind of survival, fueled by the roar of thousands of minibuses. And out in the rural areas, darkness still blankets the land when night falls, as electricity remains a distant luxury. To understand why this harsh place has held on to the title of the Warm Heart, we have to journey deep into the very roots of life here, the villages. In Kembe village, a lakeside settlement often known as Cape Maclear, the new day breaks as the first light spills across Lake Malawi. On the sandy shores, wooden boats are hauled in or prepped for departure. Nets are untangled, the catch is sorted, and then carried off to small market stalls throughout the village. The lake doesn't just shape the landscape, its fish and the bustling activity along the water's edge directly sustain countless coastal communities. As the pathways grow crowded, fish, fresh greens, and essential goods start appearing on modest little stands. Adults get their goods ready, mend their nets, fetch water, or prepare the day's meals. Children head off to school, growing up in a rhythm of life where household chores are naturally shared among everyone. Leaving the lakeshore behind and heading deep into the Dedza district, the pace of life here is entirely bound to the fields. Because of this, the daily routine for many families follows the seasons, prepping the soil, sowing the seeds, waiting for the rains, weeding, and finally, the harvest. Whether they rely on the lake or the land, the lives of these people are a constant weave of deep peace and ever-present anxiety. Their income is always precarious, fluctuating with every rainstorm or drought, the size of the catch and the treacherous roads taking their goods to market. And these burdens rarely fall on the shoulders of just one person. They're shared across a tight-knit web of family and community. In the Chiwa villages around Muadedza, a day doesn't just happen behind closed doors. It spills out into the communal courtyards, the village wells, the local markets, the churches, and the dirt paths where neighbors cross paths every single day. In the Chichewa language, this spirit is captured in the word Umunthu, the idea that a person is defined by their connections to those around them. Responsibility, therefore, doesn't stop at parents and children. It extends out to the wider community. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, and extended relatives all pitch in to watch the kids, care for the elderly, or shoulder the load when a family falls on hard times. Even Malawi's child welfare policies recognize the extended family and the community as the crucial foundation, rather than pulling a child away from the environment they know. Fetching water, prepping meals, watching the little ones, or keeping up the home. it's all divided among many hands. Family here isn't just the people living under the same roof. It's a sprawling network of kinship, duty, and mutual support that stretches across generations. These shared spaces keep that network alive and visible. Down by the well, the latest news is traded. At the church or the village square, gatherings help the community maintain bonds that go far beyond any single household. And it's within this very network that traditions, memories, and the roles of passing generations are kept alive. Up in Mua, on the highlands of central Malawi, tradition isn't just sitting quietly behind museum glass. At the Ngoni Center of Culture and Art, the stories of the Chiwa, Ngoni, and Yao people are preserved through intricate carvings, oral histories, sacred rituals, music, and dance. Beyond the center's walls, the elders, village headmen, and traditional chiefs still play a vital role in keeping order, guiding ceremonies, and binding the people to their shared duties. For the Chiwa people around Muadedza, one of the most striking symbols is the Gule Wamkulu, the great dance tied to the Nyao secret society. Dancers completely conceal themselves in elaborate masks and costumes, transforming into characters loaded with spiritual or social meaning. The Gule Wamkulu makes its appearance at initiations, weddings, funerals, and the crowning of new chiefs. This isn't just a performance, it's how the community passes down its collective memory, its moral codes, and its entire worldview. Tucked away in the granite hills of Chongoni, 127 rock art sites hold onto an even older layer of memory. Some of the paintings are linked to the Batua hunter-gatherers. Other layers reflect the lives of the Chiwa farmers who came later. At certain sites, this ancient rock art is still connected to coming-of-age rituals, rain-making ceremonies, and funerals. But tradition in Malawi isn't frozen in time. Cell phones, modern schools, the pull of the city, and new ways of living are changing how the younger generation receives, practices, and protects their heritage. Yet, to simply survive, they still have to answer a much more practical question. How do you make a living? Out in the fields of Kasungu, Machinji, or Dedza, the work begins with the soil. The vast majority of rural households in Malawi are smallholder farmers, and agriculture remains the absolute bedrock of their livelihood. Corn holds a place of reverence. It's the staple food, and it dictates whether a family will have enough to eat after the harvest or if they'll be forced to buy more at the market. The rhythm of labor follows a deeply familiar loop. The land is prepped just before the rains arrive. Seeds are sown the moment the moisture returns to the earth. Then comes weeks of weeding, tending the fields, and watching the skies. Because this farming relies entirely on rainfall, erratic weather can easily decimate a harvest. The fallout quickly ripples through a family's income and their food supply. Down in Mangochi and Monkey Bay, the lake dictates an entirely different chain of work. Small-scale fishing provides a living not just for those casting the nets, but for the boat builders, the net menders, the processors, and the fishmongers. But the lake is far from a guaranteed paycheck. Fierce winds can whip up massive waves, forcing these small wooden boats to stay beached on the shore. Heading down to Blantyre Limber, the economic pulse shifts to storefronts. Bustling markets, warehouses, rumbling trucks, and the supply chains connecting the city to the farmlands. Urban commerce offers new options beyond the fields and the water, but it can never truly detach from them. Many of the goods that show up in the city still begin their journey on a rural farm, a fishing dock, or by the hands of a village laborer. But earning an income is only half the battle. The rest lies in how a family manages to stretch those few dollars every single day. Amidst the chaotic hustle of Lilongwe Old Town, the crushing pressure of the cost of living reveals itself in the smallest daily choices. A bundle of greens, a bag of cornmeal, the minibus fare, and basic necessities all have to be weighed against one another. At the market, the price of food often rises faster than a family's income. Malawi has endured crippling inflation, driven largely by soaring food prices, which continues to squeeze the purchasing power of everyday households. For those surviving on small-scale farming, roadside vending, or day labor, the money doesn't come in a steady monthly paycheck. Some weeks the crops sell, other weeks there's barely a dime coming in. The minibuses work tirelessly, connecting the neighborhoods to the markets and schools, but they also carry the financial anxieties of every family, because every step onto that bus is another hit to the budget. In Lilongwe, the city offers more shops, services, and chances to make a buck. The trade-off is that food, transport, and daily needs rely far more heavily on cold, hard cash. Transport costs also directly impact a farmer's ability to even get their produce from the countryside into these commercial hubs. The power grid is expanding, but the gap is still massive. By 2026, about 56.5% of urban households had access to the national grid, while out in the rural areas, that number hovered at just 3.8%. So, a family budget here isn't just about numbers. It decides who gets to go to the market, whether the house has light tonight, and just how filling today's meal will be. Among the expenses you simply can't cut, food is always front and center. And in Malawi, a meal almost always begins with corn. In a simple kitchen in Dedsa or Mua, a meal starts with corn kernels that have been sun-dried, hulled, and ground into a fine flour. The flour is slowly sprinkled into a pot of boiling water, then stirred relentlessly until it thickens into nsima, a dense, soft mound of cornmeal that forms the heavy, satisfying heart of a Malawian meal. In fact, UNESCO added the culinary tradition of nsima to its representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity in 2017. But nsima is rarely eaten alone. It's paired with ndiwo, the catch-all term for relishes like leafy greens, beans, meat, or fish. Down in Mangochi and Monkey Bay, the fresh catch from Lake Malawi brings the water straight into the kitchen, with chambo being one of the most crucial and widely celebrated food fish in the country. When the cooking pot is finally set down, the day's labor briefly pauses. Family members draw close, sharing portions and picking up on half-finished conversations. That's why nsima is so much more than just a way to fill an empty stomach. The technique of preparing it, the choice of relish, and the ritual of eating together have woven it deep into the fabric of Malawian community life. Yet, behind this familiar warmth lies an incredibly fragile system of survival. So many rural households still rely on small-scale corn farming and the mercy of the rains. When the rains are late, the harvest fails, or food prices spike. The very first thing to change is the size of the portions and the relish on the table. A meal here is a stark reflection of exactly what the land, the lake, and their income will allow. But the land and the lake don't just show up on the dinner table. They dictate almost entirely how the people of Malawi live. At Cape Maclear, Lake Malawi opens up like a second sky. Its waters provide fish, a highway for travel, and jobs for the coastal communities. Around Lake Malawi National Park, the locals' livelihoods are still tied directly to this massive resource. The lake is also a totally unique ecosystem, home to hundreds of endemic fish species, most of which exist nowhere else on Earth. Because of this, every net cast into the water hangs in the balance between two desperate needs: making a living today and preserving the fish for tomorrow. The rhythm of life along the shore shifts with the winds, the waves, and the fishing seasons. When the water is calm, the boats head out, the fish hit the market, and money flows back into the families. Further south, Mount Mulanje rises up to create a completely different world. Its steep slopes are the headwaters for countless streams that feed the communities, the small holdings, and the sprawling estates at its base. Up on the Thiolo Plateau, endless rows of tea bushes blanket the hillsides, proving how the landscape itself can directly forge jobs and livelihoods. For the Yao, Manganja, and Lilongwe communities, the mountain is also deeply tied to their ancestors, spirits, sacred rituals, and memories passed down through generations. Malawi's nature both sustains its people and sets the harsh limits on how they can grow. And the vast distances between the lake, the mountains, and the cities can only be bridged by roads, vehicles, and a technology that is evolving by the day. The roaring engines of minibuses before the crack of dawn wake up the urban pulse of the capital, Lilongwe. These small vans are constantly picking up fares, linking the neighborhoods to the markets, schools, and workplaces. The minibus is the undisputed king of public transit in the capital, but every trip is still at the mercy of the fare, the brutal road conditions, and the endless waiting. On the road from Mangochi down to Monkey Bay, a steady stream of people and cargo inches closer to Lake Malawi. At Monkey Bay, the paved roads meet a much older network out on the water. From here, the legendary MV Ilala has long ferried passengers and freight up and down the lake, calling at coastal towns and the twin islands of Likoma and Chizumulu. For communities cut off from the main highways, these boats aren't just for travel. They are a vital lifeline to markets, loved ones, and essential services far away. But distances are also shrinking, thanks to the cell phone. A quick call can signal a shipment arriving, while mobile money lets people send or receive cash without ever stepping foot inside a bank. Still, spotty signals, the cost of the phones, expensive data, and just finding a place to charge them keep a wide gap between the cities and the deep rural areas. Malawi is getting connected faster than ever, but opportunity isn't arriving everywhere at the same speed. It's this very shift that is sparking the most hope in a generation that refuses to be limited by where they were born. Step into Lilongwe, and you can see the future of Malawi taking shape in the classrooms, the cell phone shops, the internet cafes, and the booming new service jobs. For a lot of young people, an education is more than just a piece of paper. It's a ticket out of the fields and a shot at a much more stable career. Smartphones are pushing news, lessons, business deals, and job postings far past the old village boundaries. But the digital door hasn't swung wide open for everyone just yet. ITU data shows that only about 18% of Malawi's population was actually using the internet in 2025. Lilongwe and Blantyre are the main magnets for rural migrants, but the infrastructure is buckling under the pressure, and there just aren't enough jobs to meet the massive expectations. Leaving the village can bring in cash, new skills, and a much wider view of the world. The trade-off? The family loses a pair of hands to share the load, and passing down the old stories, the sacred rituals, and the community duties gets a whole lot harder. Some of these young folks are studying engineering, tech, and business to create their own jobs, turning around and using that fresh knowledge to solve problems right back in their own communities. They want to push forward, but they aren't entirely ready to cut ties with their families, their land, and their identity. When the workday finally ends, those heavy choices take a back seat. Malawi settles back into a smaller, much more intimate rhythm. As the day fades, the frantic pace of the alleys in Lilongwe Old Town begins to slow. The workers trudge back to their neighborhoods, while the kids wrap up their lessons or their games out in the dirt yards. Out in Chembe village, or some quiet settlement in Dedza, the smoke from cooking fires starts to drift up between the rooftops. The water is hauled in, the firewood is sparked, and the nsima and relish are prepped for dinner. With the day's labor on pause, families finally have a moment to check in, trade the local gossip, and figure out exactly what needs to get done by tomorrow morning. Music, church gatherings, and those casual chats out in the yard keep the bonds tight between the families in the community. But we shouldn't romanticize this intimacy as just some charming, simple life without modern comforts. Access to electricity in Malawi is still severely limited, with a massive divide between the city and the country, making studying at night, charging a phone, or keeping a small business running incredibly tough in a lot of places. An evening might feel peaceful, but that peace doesn't make the harsh realities disappear. As the light dies down, the heavy pressures that the daylight sort of masked start to creep back in. Down in the lower Shire Valley, the fields around Chikwawa and Mulanje can flip from bone dry to completely flooded in a heartbeat. When the rains show up late, the corn stunts and a family's food reserves start to shrink fast. But when the rains pound down or a tropical cyclone rips through, the water can drown the fields, wiping out homes, washing away roads, and killing off livestock. Chikwawa and Mulanje have been hammered by massive floods time and time again, while their farming still leans heavily on rainfall and their ability to store water remains dangerously low. In 2024, a brutal, drawn-out drought, fueled by El Niño, devastated roughly 44% of Malawi's entire corn crop. Just one freak season of bad weather can send shockwaves from the fields straight to the markets, gutting incomes and emptying the plates of millions. In communities cut off from the main roads, the struggle is even worse, thanks to sky-high transport costs and the grueling distances to schools, clinics, or a decent market. A washed-out road doesn't just make a trip take longer. It means the crops rot before they hit the market. Vital supplies can't reach the village, and essential services get pushed even further out of reach. Educational opportunities are just as skewed. Many rural schools are fighting a losing battle against overcrowded classrooms, a lack of materials, and a severe shortage of trained teachers. The power grid is inching outward. But the chasm between the city and the country remains massive, continuing to strangle education, business, and access to the outside world in so many areas. But in the face of all this crushing pressure, the people here don't just stand around, waiting for a miracle. Farming families are reorganizing how they work, joining cooperatives, and fighting to squeeze every ounce of efficiency out of their land and water. Down in the Shire Valley, massive irrigation projects are aiming to finally break the total reliance on rainfall, while beefing up land and resource management for the smallholder farmers. This tight-knit solidarity helps people survive the immediate crises. But true, long-term resilience is still going to demand real infrastructure, reliable services, and rock-solid policies. So, when life here is boxed in by so many harsh limits, what is it that makes so many people still call Malawi the place they truly belong? For countless rural families in Malawi, their homeland isn't just a dot on a map. It's anchored in their front yards, in the fields worked by generations of their ancestors, and in the ancient rituals that still call the young back to stand beside the elders. For many of these rural families, the land is both the absolute bedrock of their survival and a legacy that's accessed and passed down through deep ties of kinship and local custom. Even so, choosing to stay isn't always easy, and it isn't always entirely by choice. The promise of jobs and schooling can drag the youth away to Lilongwe, Blantyre, or beyond, while a lack of cash and few options for making a living leave others trapped, unable to ever leave. But even when someone does migrate, the tether to the family holds strong, through the money sent back home, the occasional visits, and the unbreakable duty to their kin. In Chichewa, this enduring spirit is known as Umunthu. A person is defined entirely by their relationships with others. Leaving might unlock a new paycheck and a wider world of experience, but staying keeps you close to your family, your ancestral land, and the kinds of deep obligations you just can't put a price tag on. So, finding peace here doesn't mean a life without brutal hardship. It's the profound feeling of knowing exactly where you belong and knowing exactly where they're still waiting for you to come back. And it's right here, at the crossroads between the desperate hunger for change and the deep desire to belong, that the title, The Warm Heart, truly earns its meaning. You can't truly understand Malawi just by staring out over the vast expanse of Lake Malawi, standing in the shadow of Mount Mulanje, or looking at endless rows of sun-baked corn. And this country shouldn't just be boiled down to grim statistics about poverty, blackouts, or a lack of opportunity. The real warmth lies in how a family gathers to share a single meal, split the backbreaking work, and carry the weight of their duties together. You see it when the whole community steps up to raise the kids, care for the elderly, and always keep a place open for those who had to leave. The old traditions are still handed down, not to keep Malawi stuck in the past, but so the new generation knows exactly where they're stepping from as they move forward. The people here aren't just enduring their circumstances. They are planting, casting nets, hustling in the markets, studying, adapting, leaving, and always coming back. They keep building a future out of whatever this harsh land gives them, and out of whatever they can forge with their own hands. As the evening sun dips low, a family huddles together for dinner. Out on the lake, the last boat of the day slowly makes its way back to shore. The dirt road still cuts through the fields, leading people far away, and eventually guiding them right back home. The warm heart of Africa, then, is so much more than just a catchy tourism slogan. It's the way the people of Malawi hold on to one another even when life relentlessly forces them to change.